Hello, my name is Calvin Grigal. I am an undergraduate researcher at the College of New Jersey, and for my presentation, I'm going to be talking about the temporal and ethnic trends in Gravestone form of historical Northwestern New Jersey cemeteries. So many gravestone studies have been conducted in recent years. One of the most famous ones were by Dietz and Deflison, and recently, especially New Jersey, Richard Veit has looked at them, and they allow us to look at the socioeconomic status of the people at the time, the religious and funerary traditions, and the cultural change that has occurred in a given region or across America. And the region I looked at was New Jersey, and New Jersey is one of the most culturally diverse colonies, and it had people of Swedish ancestry, Dutch, English, Scottish, Irish, and German. And to look at ethnicity, I wanted to investigate whether ethnicity might be a contributing factor in the selection of gravestone shape in the region, because a lot of research has been conducted on iconography and mortuary art. So the shift from death's heads to cherubs to urns and willows, like it has rarely been studied. The shape has rarely been studied in the field. So first, I looked at 5 historical cemeteries across Sussex and Warren County in North New Jersey. I printed out multiple sheets for each grave site. I included the names of the deceased, the year of their death and birth, if included, the gravestone form or the category of what the gravestone shape was, and other notable features or identifying features such as gravestone carvers or iconography. And I only counted headstones dated prior to 1900 because I wanted to look at the historical grave sites of New Jersey. And after the data collection, I assigned an ethnicity based off their surnames. And here were the 5 locations I looked at. I went to Newton, Stillwater, Frelinghuysen, Hardwick, and Hope, all in Sussex and Warren counties. And so after going to these locations, I found, and assigning the ethnicities, I found that there were 4 prominent ethnic groups of this region. There was English, Scottish and Irish, German, and a mix of Dutch and French ancestry. So for the expected population, I actually used a source that estimated the percent of the ethnic population of New Jersey based off the first United States Census in 1790, and they broke it down by county, which was very useful. So I was able to look at Sussex County, which included Sussex and Warren at the time. So I was able to look at English, Scottish and Irish, German and Dutch. So English at the time was 55%, Scottish and Irish was 10% combined, German was 20%, and the Dutch were 15%. However, the observed population I got was very close in the English and German with about 52% and 23%. But the Scottish and Irish population was much higher than expected. And for the Dutch, it was less than half of what was expected. In addition to the ethnicities that were present, there were 5 common gravestone forms. So in the first picture, you'll see the shoulder shape with a lobe in the middle with 2 cornered edges, Philadelphia shape with an intricate like Baroque type shape with rounded edges and a rounded center lobe, half rounded, which is not a fully rounded shape, just about partially rounded, and then a pointed arch in the 4th photo, and then all tablets with bases in the 5th photo. So this last one, all tablets with bases, if you look at my cursor, it's basically any top. It could be any of these tops, but as long as it had a base and it wasn't just a slab of stone in the ground, that was counted under all tablets with bases. And these 5 categories comprised essentially 80% of all the gravestones tallied during this study. And so I can break down this table for you. On the right side, it looks at the breakdown of the forms or the shapes of the gravestones. So you can see here that shoulder and pointed arch were the most frequent, and down here is the ethnic breakdown seen earlier in the observed population. And I do want to make a note for later that the German population for the shoulder shape is much higher compared to the English when looking at the rest of the other shapes, it's always consistently less than the English, but here it's much higher, and that's important later. So I looked at the ethnicity, and I looked at the gravestone shape, and I wasn't intending to look at temporal trends in my initial hypothesis for what I was trying to investigate, but it came about that since I had the data for the years of death attributed to each of the gravestones, I figured I might do a seriation graph, much like Dietz and Deflison did in their 1966 paper, which with the death's heads, the cherubs, and the urns and willows. So I was able to compile the frequency for each year of the 5 most common shapes. And for shoulder, it actually creates a very defined battleship curve, peaking around 1800, starting in 1785 and ending around 1815. And then the Philadelphia shape, while less defined, is still pronounced, where it starts towards the end of the shoulder era in like 1815, peaks around 1830, and is no longer frequent by 1840. Half rounded starts around the same time as Philadelphia, and it doesn't necessarily peak, but it is consistently present throughout the middle of the 19th century until 1865. The 4 shape pointed arch starts around 1835 after half rounded has become popular, peaks around 1855, and then decreases its popularity by the 1870s. And then the last category, all tablets with bases, was frequent in the latter half of the 19th century and continued that way until the end of the century. So for the shoulder shape, it was inspired by the 3-lobed tripart from New England Puritans. So they believed that it represented a doorway into the afterlife. And so you might notice that the description of theirs was 3 lobes, while the shoulder was a singular lobe with the cornered edges. So it likely just was derived from that shape. And it was a bit of a shift away from those Puritan ideals of the early part of that century, where there was death's heads and cherubs, because in the study that I conducted, there was only one instance of a crossbones or death's heads and another instance of cherubs. So they were less frequent by the end of the 18th century. And so instead of those shapes, it left like a residual space to be filled by epitaphs or monograms. And after the shoulder shape went away, the neoclassical influence came in with the simplistic half-rounded shape and pointed arch shapes, in addition to the Philadelphia style, which culturally had diffused from the city. It was actually popular in the late 1700s at that time, and then it appeared in northern New Jersey around 1815. So a few decades of time took for it to become more popular in this region. And so for the last category, all tablets with bases became more accessible to the average consumer by the latter half of the 19th century. And Mark Nonestide actually called it a shift from markers to monuments. And a fun fact that I actually learned while doing research was that Sears Roebuck in like 1900 actually had a catalog for gravestone monuments. So it kind of just exemplifies how commercialized the process became. And it wasn't just a local stone carver in the town or in the county that you went to get it, and it was all from the same person or same few people. It became like a nationwide industry towards the turn of the 1900s. So earlier I mentioned that the shoulder shape was very frequent in the German population in the early 1800s, late 1700s, and this was likely due to local carver John Solomon Tietzel, noted by Richard Veit, that he was a German immigrant who came to northern New Jersey, and there was also a large Palatine German population in the region, so they likely were influenced or decided to take up his business because he was a German immigrant. And he also wrote, he inscribed 13 tombstones in German in the Stillwater Cemetery, and are still there to this day. You can see on the right side, there's a German language one with his signature on the bottom. And so that's probably the only reason why the shoulder shape was more popular with the Germans at that time. However, that was the only correlation between ethnicity and gravestone shape that I uncovered in my study. Over time, they were essentially the same for all the 5 shapes, or for all the other 4 shapes. However, there was a strong temporal trend that emerged with the 5 gravestone shapes that was not expected. Thank you for listening. That's my presentation.